Welcome to The Balancing Act, the podcast for mastering work, wealth and well-being, with me, your author and host, Sarah Brennand. Here we explore conversations, insights and expert advice through the lens of what truly drives high performance and sustainable success, aligning your money and mission, strengthening your mental and physical health, and creating a more intentional work-life balance. Each week, I'm joined by leaders, professionals and specialists who share how they navigate their own balancing act, along with practical tools and strategies that you can apply in yours. In this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Lynda Shaw, a cognitive neuroscientist and business psychologist specialising in the science of emotion and leadership. We explore how emotions operate below conscious awareness, why they drive behaviour and decision making, and how leaders can use this understanding to build trust, connection and resilience. It's a practical conversation about emotional intelligence as a core leadership capability. Good morning, Lynda, and thank you so much for joining me today. Now, we are wired to connect, and I know we're going to take some time to talk about the science of emotion and leadership, which I think is a fascinating area in itself, because we have what typically is referred to as emotion being a more soft skill, with the science, which is more typically referred to as, your data and your factual driven world. So can we just start by you sharing, your story as to how you became interested in or started your career in what is a potentially quite a complex world?
Surely. Well, I have been reading about consciousness since I was 14. And I went through life, which I won't bore you with, went through life to the trigger part. The relevant part is that I went to university as a mature student, and all I wanted to do was study social anthropology, because I'm fascinated by people, why people do what they do culturally and around the world. And I'm an adventure traveller, so I'm one to get amongst the people and observe and to get involved and try to communicate with people. And so that's driven me. But because my children were very small at the time, I had to choose a university that was on my doorstep, that was very close to where I live because of the logistics of having kids at school, etc. And in the university that was sensible for me to go to was one that insisted I did a joint honours degree. So I did social anthropology with psychology. Partway through that, I realised how hard anthropology is, because it's about life. It's about everything. And I'm one of these people that's so curious. I'll go, yes, but what if? And my 2,000 word essay become 20,000 words in overnight. So I was like forever shortening this stuff. So then I found the psychology easy. So I then did a master's in psychology after I got my first degree. And my supervisor, I was looking at his bio on the university website, and he's a neurophysicist of vision, an incredibly intelligent, very, very bright man. But so his bio was really, really long, and at the very bottom was the word consciousness. I went, oh, consciousness, this is so cool. So I asked him if he would supervise a PhD, and my PhD, and he said yes. So I researched unconscious processing of emotion using fMRI scanning equipment and behavioural studies. So that started the scientific world for me, looking at this. So consciousness is my big thing. What people don't realize with any kind of emotional intelligence or emotional processing is that it's below conscious awareness. And my research demonstrated that. I looked at 9 regions of interest in the brain, and they were most certainly activated when the participants in the fMRI scanning machine were presented with visual stimuli that was loaded with different kinds of emotional content below conscious awareness. They didn't know they were seeing this stuff. So so I carried on, and I have been on that tack ever since. And I was awarded my doctorate in 2008. So it's been some years now. So I'm very much involved in unconscious processing, and I'm very much involved in emotional intelligence. So, but the interesting thing is, when I came out of university. Well, got my doctorate. I thought, right,
Yeah.
okay. And I started lecturing about consciousness and emotion and all those things. And then I thought, actually, I had 3 businesses before I went into academia, and I really prefer the business world. So I came out of uni, went back into the business world to conquer the world. I was going to fix everything. I was so wrong. I was so wrong. Oh boy, was I wrong. And everyone was, I came out back into the corporate world, and it was all like, oh, I'm here, business is all about making money and saving money and etc. And I thought, right, I'm hitting a brick wall here. And then it was not long after that Standard Life, the large pension providers, they hired me to look at emotion, unconscious processing of emotion, or indeed conscious processing of emotion, in when they are trying to sell product, when they're trying to sell pension plans. And we we scanned people, and we put in front of them on a screen 3 different kinds of letters. One was the normal in finance stuff, which is pie charts and more pie charts, which I really am not into with the finance stuff. Luckily, my husband is, because it's extremely important to understand.
Yes.
And then my thing was the emotional letters. One was positive emotion, so it was words like saving money, saving for your family, saving for grandchildren, buying your children's first car, that sort of emotional pull. And then there was a negative emotion like what happens if you don't save, and what, not the negativity side of it. And without fail, the stats were hugely successful in that people who saw the positive emotional words were actually galvanized into taking out pension plans. Now, this is something that advertising has known for many years, but the finance industry not at that time. They certainly do now. But at the same time as we did that research, and over in New Zealand, the Bank of New Zealand were also carrying out studies about emotion and how people respond to at the bank when they are presented with friendly, happy faces. And so it's quite interesting that the world was taking more notice all at the same time. And so absolutely, emotion and unconscious processing is written through me like Brighton Rock. Yeah.
So can you just explain the difference between conscious and unconscious processing? Are there emotions that sit more in one area than the other, or is it more about how do we move them between conscious and unconscious, or don't we?
All emotion is below conscious awareness.
Okay.
To start with, we have to bring it into our awareness to be consciously aware of it.
Yes.
So all emotion there is. I mean, Lisa Feldman Barrett Professor Lisa Feldman Barrett has put throw a bit of a hand grenade into the classics neuroscience studies about emotion, which is great. Absolutely fantastic, and her lab is solid, it's superb. So if anybody wants to learn more about emotion, have a look at Lisa Feldman Barrett's work. Now, she says that we use emotion actually to make sense of something. But nevertheless, it is still below conscious awareness. So the work that I cite often when we talk about this is Antonio Damasio back in the early 2000s. He had a very famous study, which you can see online. You can actually do it online if you wish, because his son is now running his lab. He's since retired. But Damasio's work was called the gambling task on this particular instance. And what he did with the participants, he gave them 4 decks of cards, 2 black, 2 red. And they were wired up to a skin conductance response machine, which measures the perspirations in the palm of the hand. Yeah. And the only instruction they had was turn over the cards. Here is $2,000. Your job is to win money or lose money just by turning over the cards. That was their instruction. That was it. Of course, the cards were rigged. It was a psychology experiment, bound to be. So you've got to control all the variables as much as you can. So they started turning the cards over. Now, on each card was a sentence that said how much money you won or how much money you lost. So there were two decks of cards that were high risk. You've won $2,000, which would be the whole lot gone, or you've lost $1,800, or the other way around. You see what I mean? Big numbers.
Yes.
The low risk were the small numbers. You've just lost 50 cents, you've won 25 cents, and so on.
Yeah.
It took the participants turning over 50 cards to work out that two of these decks of cards were, or they actually could gain more money by going for the low numbered cards. Okay, it took them 50 turns of the cards. It took them 80 turns of that card to realize what on earth was going on. Meanwhile, the skin conductance machine was measuring the sweat, which was measuring the nervousness, the anxiety, or the fear every time the hand went towards one of the decks of cards. And the hand knew after 10 turns of the card, as opposed to the unconsciously 50 turns of the card, or consciously 80 turns of the card. So our body knew before we were remotely aware of what was happening.
Yeah.
So Antonio Damasio's work was groundbreaking at the time. And as I say, that test is still going on to this day. The data is still being collected. Therefore, we know that if when we are working with emotions, it's all unconscious, all below conscious awareness, regardless of what emotion you're feeling. But even when you're angry, you're overtly being angry, but you're not really, the start of that anger is below conscious awareness. It's when you are displaying the behavior that you think, oh yeah, I'm angry, but I am so angry, I don't care, I'm going to go for it. So you see what I mean? So long answer, short question, but yeah.
So on those, because I'm intrigued, because there's a lot of rhetoric around the trigger response and how as we grow up, we have to learn quickly, and we can't give attention to everything in our surroundings because it's not possible. So we learn to create these kind of trigger responses, and some of those influence the different emotions that we might feel unconsciously before they become conscious. They're linked to things like phobias, for example. So if we're developing those throughout our life, and some of those, as can often be the case, aren't helpful, how would you recommend people go about loosening that trigger? Or is it a scientific process to be explained? Is it a recommendation as to here's how you become aware that it's not helpful, and these are the things that you can do to desensitize yourself to it, perhaps?
Well, experience will teach us what's helpful and what isn't.
Yeah.
So some of our responses, we will find that the consequences are favourable. Sometimes they're not. Now, we've got a big problem with this word consequences, because people seem to have stopped considering them. And I'm talking about all generations. I'm talking, even I can sit in a boardroom with my clients and I'm listening to something and I'm thinking, and I will say, have you considered the consequences? Well, yeah, because when we've done that before, this is what we got. I said, yeah, but what if it's slightly different, because you're dealing with different people, different perceptions, different brains, different everything. What could be the consequences? Let's go through the scenario of all the consequences that can happen. And then we've got more data to consider, make an informed decision. So if we have now determined the consequences of certain emotions that we have, so we've filed that in our perceptions, which is our own personal reality. Great, absolutely fine. Now we're triggered. It is honestly a case of bringing things into our awareness.
Yeah.
And to actually take a breath, take a step back, and just momentarily think, is my gut reaction going to be helpful or not?
Yeah.
If you know by experience that it's not, then that's when you just think for a moment, engage your prefrontal cortex, engage the thinking part of your brain, so that you are not shooting from the hip with the latest response to a trigger that by experience does push your buttons.
And how easy is it to make that change over time so that it is no longer an unconscious response that has to be managed? Is that possible, or will it always be there physiologically?
We have to remember that all emotions are of a value. They are valuable triggers. They're signals for us that something's wrong, something's the matter, something is great, something isn't. Whatever the emotion is, it is information. It is intelligence. It is intelligence that we can use. So if we are triggered, we will be triggered because our emotions are keeping us safe. They are keeping us, they're enabling us to get out of the way if something's happening. I mean, the fight or flight response is there for a very good reason. My strong suggestion is that you become aware of your triggers, and then you become aware of your responses. And then you give yourself a moment to take that breath so that you can control it. And you can do it, but it takes self-awareness. And I will argue that self-awareness is the greatest skill any of us can have, including, of course, our emotional intelligence. But self-awareness is massive, because without being self-aware of emotional triggers, then emotional intelligence cannot develop well enough. Yeah.
So what would be your recommendations for somebody to start working on their self-awareness?
Ask yourself what is triggering you. Ask yourself, notice, pay attention to when you feel the feelings, and write them down. Just write them down, and then you're starting to become more self-aware because you've written them down. Keep those notes for a short time and then destroy them, because you really don't want to go over the same old, and you certainly don't want somebody else to read them. Get rid of them. Burn them ceremoniously, or tear them up, shred them, whatever. Okay? Keep writing the notes, but try not to hold on to that for too long. Let them go. The other thing is, if we are trying the self-awareness, that is the one way of doing it. We now also need to become more aware of other people's emotions at the same time. And that is what emotional intelligence is, of course. So to do that, it comes from curiosity. And it's very difficult to be curious about people and judgmental at the same time. So we're parking being judgmental, and we're actually really curious about why they've done something. We're asking questions, we're just trying to understand more. And in so doing, we start to gain more empathy and compassion about that person. And so it starts with curiosity. Self-awareness and curiosity are probably the key steps.
Okay. And within an organizational setting, how is a leader or manager, are there practical things that people can be doing to do that in any kind of formalized way?
Yeah, I think first of all, if it's going to be formalized, that the senior slice of the organization, they really do need to have some training on emotional intelligence and self-awareness. Once the seniors are on board, then we can run that training to the rest of the teams. And I think it has to come from the top. Otherwise, we're just putting a sticking plaster over a wound. So we really need to do that. And one of the key things for people to remember is that actually emotional intelligence is not just about behavior. Of course it is, but it's not just about that. It's also a neurobiological process. So if we understand it's a neurobiological process, we are more likely to think, right, there's something I can do about this. There's something I can do about my brain, which is actually fantastic. And you can. And the awareness is absolutely key. It also helps us build credibility and trust. So when we see our teams see us trying to do something about it, something to be strategic about this, then they can actually think, oh, okay, if it's good enough for the seniors, it's good enough for me. Let's see what we can do here. And you start to trust the consistent way the managers are handling it, the leadership are handling it, and you trust them more. So you're not just trusting the process, you're trusting them as well. And that's bound to increase productivity.
Yeah.
So it's truly a win-win.
And what you talked there about there being a process. What is that process in kind of the scientific perspective that makes us recognize, feel an emotional and respond?
Okay. Number one is to learn and understand that a lot of this goes on below conscious awareness. If I picked up an A4 sheet of paper like this, actually, that's got something written on it. Hold on a second. There you go. If I pick that up, and I'm surrounded by paper, by the way. So if I picked this up and I said, this is your whole brain, and a part of this in your brain is conscious processing. The rest is unconscious processing. I ask this question a lot. Some people say conscious processing is 10%, 20%, 25%. It's actually, I'll do it here. It's actually that dot. Okay. That's conscious processing. The rest is unconscious processing. So when we are doing any kind of understanding about emotional intelligence, to understand how much goes on below conscious awareness is actually very valuable. Because people often think that it makes us a bad person. It doesn't. The brain is always looking for shortcuts and to do things quickly. And all of these shortcuts have side effects, and we make mistakes, like by unconscious bias and so on. But that doesn't make us bad people. It makes us normal people. So we have to, first step is to understand what unconscious processing is in this context, and what we can do about it. Then you start to build on, well, okay, how do we interfere with that? Well, we engage the prefrontal cortex. We take that breath, we step back, we engage the prefrontal cortex, and then it becomes a thinking exercise. We now are using our cognitive abilities. So we're now thinking about it as opposed to just blurting out, right? So that's absolutely brilliant. So we're looking at the prefrontal cortex. Then we start to think, right, I've got some control here. That is great. My next process then is actually, as a leader, to think, well, how am I behaving? What? Because the best lessons are taught, not caught, not taught. So you can talk as much as we want, but the best thing to do is get your people to mirror the way you're behaving. So you need to behave the way you want others to behave. So as a leader, we have to consider our own self-awareness again. We have to consider how we're coming across. Are we agitated? Are we angry? Couldn't we find the car keys this morning for a meeting? Was he vomit on the carpet? What happened this morning before we even got to the office, or indeed started our remote calls? Whatever it is, we can't take that to the call or to the meeting and not expect others to mirror that agitation, that aggression, that apathy, whatever it is. We need to arrive as we want others to be. That's not to say that we're not authentic and genuine, because you could start the meeting, I can't believe I've had a morning like this. I couldn't find my keys, the cat vomited, la, la, la. That, of course, would go, oh, crumbs, that's really, but you've voiced it, you've lined it up. Now let's get on with the job. So they're some of the things that you can do, and that's all scientific. There's all the brain with the mirror neuron systems, the prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, all of those areas of the brain that are in play here.
Okay. So in terms of, because I know we started by talking about that importance of connection, and I think the self-awareness is about recognizing your own connections that you have in the brain that are causing you to respond or react in certain ways, and therefore, as you pointed out vitally, it's not just doing, it's recognizing the consequence of those and working out which ones are to the benefit of you and to keep and reinforce, and which ones are the ones that you'd like to change. How would you recommend we use the understanding of neuroscience and of emotional intelligence to enable us to better connect with other people? Because I think in a world where AI, for example, is growing, and the landscape of business is changing, and a lot more things are becoming automated, and remote working and everything else that's going on. That human part of business and performance is really important, potentially your competitive advantage. How would you recommend ensuring, or how would we build those social connections and professional connections?
An excellent point. I'm working with this all of the time. Connection equals great communication, and communication, if it's very bad, causes wars. If it's very good, it actually creates peacetime. It's massive. Absolutely massive. And in a business sense, it is everything, communication. So the connections come from good communication. So how do we get those? Well, first of all, what you need to do is make sure we're not stuck in our sympathetic nervous system all the time. Okay. So if you're running a team of people and deadlines are on, the shareholders are baying hounds at the door, all sorts of things are happening, the pressure is on. You are in the sympathetic nervous system, you are there, and you are, cortisol is rising, noradrenaline is rising, all of these chemicals are on alert, and we are therefore only concentrating on the immediate threat with whatever's going on at work. We are not thinking in terms of creativity, innovation, or thinking around things. So our thinking is very much narrowed. It has to be. We are focusing on the perceived threat. Very necessary sometimes, but a lot of the time not. What we need to do, first of all, is to get ourselves in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest system. It is where you want your people to be, is calm and alert. So don't micromanage, don't nag, don't be negative. Actually talk to people like human beings and actually start putting them in their parasympathetic nervous system, calm and alert, getting the job done. And then you start to see a rise in the feel-good neurochemicals like dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, all of these chemicals that will be much more helpful than stuck in a awfully high secretions of cortisol and noradrenaline, which will actually also cause physical ill health. We don't want that, because then people are off sick and they're not at work. I mean, for heaven's sake. So we really do need to consider getting people in the best possible state to be healthy and efficient.
Yeah. You mentioned at the very beginning of the conversation about an interest from a study perspective, but also from a travel perspective in that kind of different cultures. Have you seen, or do you feel that there's a difference in understanding or awareness of the notion of emotional intelligence as a general area across cultures, or is it quite similar?
There are cultural differences. There are always cultural differences about many, many things, and they are to learn from. I love studying different cultures because I see how other countries are doing much better than we are in certain things, and vice versa. And we must learn from one another. Because why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't you learn about another group of people who are doing something really well? Why wouldn't you think, well, hang on a minute, I need to try that. What is that going to? An intelligent person changes their mind, okay? So that is what we do. We don't get stuck in old ideas. We just change our mind because of new evidence, new information coming in. Yes, certainly there are other cultures who are not, they haven't prioritized emotional intelligence as much, but I believe that as they too are seeing other cultures who are faring very well at perhaps looking at emotional intelligence, and they will want to take that on board. They will just think, well, hang on a minute, there is something in this. So there are all types of everybody in all cultures. We need just to remember that although there is a cultural differences, it shouldn't be a divide.
No,
we can learn from one another.
Yeah, we're all human, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly.
And what's happening in your world at the moment in terms of research or practical work in the area of the neuroscience and the understanding of the brain and our performance? And what's the main areas that you're focusing on, or that you will be focusing on in the near future?
Oh, thank you for asking, Sarah. Well, I've got little grandbabies. And it was about 18 months ago now. I was looking at them. You know, I want to devour them. I want to eat
Yes.
them. I love them so much. Okay, I adore these little people. And I was watching them playing, and all of a sudden, I got this awful feeling of, I thought, what's the world going to be like when you're my age? And it just, it really threw me. It really did. And for a couple of weeks, I was really upset. And I thought, right, Lynda, come on, what can you do? What can you do? You recycle things, you buy items from sustainable sources, you know, make sure that people are being paid properly, but materials that are not going to end up on the bonfire in a nanosecond, things that last. I'm trying to do all of that, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And I thought, what does the world need? Let's go at it like that. What does the world need? And I thought, well, what the world needs is genius ideas, innovation. And I thought, well, okay, but not necessarily just geniuses, people with the genius ideas as well, because we all have them in times of need. We do amazing things in times of need. I thought, right, I'm not a genius. That's not helpful, Lynda. What can you do now? And I thought, but I know how to communicate. So that then galvanized me into seeking out talented leaders who have got amazing ideas to help them see their genius ideas come to fruition.
Yeah.
I don't even realize they're having them, to be honest with you. But I'm now taking it a step further because I adore the topic of consciousness. I'm now working with people to understand and visibly or auditory hear and see what is not seen and what is not heard. So it's the things that is going on below the conscious awareness of those around us, and how to actually notice that, and how to bring that into their awareness and our own awareness, so that we communicate much better and become very much more influential without being unethical. So that's what I'm doing. Yeah. It's very exciting.
Very exciting. And if somebody wants to get involved with that, do they just contact you? Are you working with a particular group of people?
I'm working with senior talented business people, professions, and engineers, lawyers, all sorts of people who have got who want to get above the crud, the nonsense that we are hearing on ground level on a daily basis. The the depressing rubbish that we are being is oppressing us. Because I've got a saying is I never shrink, I only ever expand. And I want to work with people who want to expand too, who want to rise above this nonsense and actually do something that is going to be worthwhile for our babies and grandbabies and great grandbabies. That's where I'm coming from. So it's the talented people who actually want more than the same old, same old.
Yeah. Okay. And just to finish on a key signature question for the Balancing Act advice wall, for what would be your top recommendation for just one thing that somebody, having listened to this, can go away and start to do differently, that's going to improve their self-awareness and which feeds into the emotional intelligence?
Talk to people. Just talk to people. There was a CEO I worked with in Australia. It was remotely, sadly. I did go to Australia. And he managed to triple the turnover of the business in 18 months. And his board of directors were really angry with him. They were angry because he was never looking at spreadsheets. All of our CEOs before have got spreadsheets in front of us and they're looking at the spreadsheet. He won't. In fact, he doesn't even turn up at some of the meetings. And they were... And I spoke to him and I said, what are you doing? He went, I'm talking to the people on the shop floor. He said, I'm asking them, what's the word on the street? What do people think of the products? What's the competition doing? What do you want to do in the next 5 years? Where do you want to be? Where do you want to be in the next year? That's how you triple turnover. That's how you get an incredibly loyal staff where you've got people not leaving in their droves and you've got a recruitment issue. That is how you do it. You talk to people. That's my one tip.
That's really powerful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You've been listening to The Balancing Act for mastering work, wealth and wellbeing. You can head over to the website for further insight, links and resources related to this episode at www.balancing-act.co.uk, and remember to subscribe to catch all the new episodes as they're released.